encounter.
But no, I feel
It feels very
Hello and welcome to the Unwanted Opinion podcast, the show on which me and my friends give our unwanted opinion on all things film. My name is Lewis and I'm joined today with Kyle.
Hello.
Hello, and Gonzalo. Hey, he's back. He's back from his travels at last.
I'm back.
You know, we're all of us back together. I feel like I celebrate this every time we do a show together, but that's
every.
the case
Well, it's so rare.
Pretty much every other
You have to
episode.
celebrate it.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. It's a shame.
It's a good thing there's
But
three of
you're
us.
glad to
you
be
know.
back home.
Yeah,
Gonzalo?
I'm back home. Everything's good. Everything's nice. Got the heating on. It's quite cold now in Spain, so yeah, getting cozy.
Oh, very good. Right, so on today's episode, like we mentioned on last week's episode, we are of course going to be talking about David Fincher this week because The Killer releases today, I think when this comes up, today on Netflix. His latest feature film starring Michael Fassbender, which we reviewed last week, if you want to go back and listen to that and hear all about it. But we're going to celebrate David Fincher, talk about our favourite of his films, and we also have reviews for Bottoms, latest American comedy, which came out months ago in the States, but not for us, sadly, and Saltburn, which actually releases next week. So, we'll just jump right into them. I guess, Kyle, will I go first? Do you want to talk about Saltburn first? It's up to you.
Do you want to do Bottoms and then we both do Saltburn?
Okay, I'll do Bottoms. Yeah. So Bottoms was directed by Emma Seligman. Sorry, she actually did Shiva Baby a few years ago, which is available now on Mubi. This was also written by Emma Seligman and Rachel Sennett, and stars Rachel Sennett as well as Ayo Edebiri, Ruby Cruz, Marshawn Lynch, and many, many more. So PG, who's played by Rachel Sennett, and Josie, who's played by Ayo Edebiri, are two queer students in their final year of high school. They're deeply unpopular and fantasize about losing their virginity to two of the most popular girls in school, Isabel and Kaya. However, Isabel unfortunately goes out with the moronic quarterback Jeff in this football-obsessed town. However, after an over-exaggerated incident with Jeff, between Jeff, Josie and PG, the school now think PG and Josie are dangerous fighters, and as a result, they create a female fight club in the hopes that they can sleep with Isabel and Kaya. So, that is the setup for Bottoms. And so when Bottoms started, I wasn't really sure what I was in for. Like, it was a weird first 10 minutes. It wasn't really making me laugh, and it was one of those things where it's one of those comedies where like they were improving and you could sort of tell they're improving, and I was like, oh no, is this going to be the whole thing? Is it them going to be trying to riff and it's going to go on and on, it's not going to be funny at all? Well, I was very, very quickly disproved, because Bottoms is the funniest film of this year. I think it was absolutely hilarious. Now, and I think I realised what it was. I think I just wasn't clicking with what this style was, because after the first 10 minutes and that whole incident, like I said, happens, it becomes very clear that this film is like a completely over-the-top like caricature of high school. It's, you know, it's one of this like absurdist quality,
Mean Girls style,
and
kind of thing.
it's like the whole more than that. The whole thing is like a complete circus. The guys in it are like these animalistic morons going about, and it's really. I was like, right, okay, I get it now, and I get what it's going for. This is not at all reality. This is some sort of abstracted, twisted version of everything, and I found that interesting because this is like I said, it's an absurdist world, and I find it interesting that this is a female-led comedy, a feminist comedy, and we had Barbie earlier this year, which also was over the top, nonsensical, took a nonsensical style and approach to its narrative. And it's very purposeful for both the cases. It demonstrates how ridiculous, like some of the societal constructs we've put in place for women, and how we sort of celebrate hyper-masculinity and stupidity, especially when it comes to things like sports. In this case, becomes a whole thing, and like this whole town worships the football team and this rival football team. Sennett and Edebiri are terrific leads. Sennett is the more unhinged, chaotic of the pair, and Debray plays the more level-headed sort of, the comedy straight person, who's the more rational, level-headed person, and then through her perspective, everything just seems so bizarre, and she's the only one bringing a rational head to it, and that in itself brings a lot of comedy. There's a really strange quality to the film as well, which I really liked, is that the film itself feels completely out of time. So you have people using flip phones and phone books and CD players listening to 80s music, but then they're using modern jargon, and then there's a PS5 in the corner of someone's bedroom. It's like the fashion senses are all random and all from different time periods. It's very purposeful, I think, as well. It's obviously because it's taking a lot of cues from like classic rom-coms, and it's also got this modern flip and this modern analysis, which I really liked, and I kind of liked that there's no time period where this really belongs. Everyone's just in all sorts of strange garb and doing strange things. And when someone whipped out the flip phone, I was like, wait, is that is that because they think it's cool to have a flip phone now, or what's going on here? But it's just this thing. It doesn't make any sense in all of it. And while the film kind of goes through these classic, rom-com cliches, it's always firing jokes, and it's always got these hilarious side characters that you never roll your eyes at. Oh, we're doing this cliche, and we've got to do this thing between the second and third act, and it's that whole thing. And in fact, I'd say the very typical rom-com structure actually goes in its favour in its execution, because when we get to the third act finale, it goes completely off the rails and becomes this twisted, weird, just mad spectacle on display. I thought it was really great. But at its core, this film has heart, and you really bond with this whole team of misfits that join the club. Because they're looking for protection, and they're looking to find solace and comfort and friends. And when the fight club gets underway, I was like, this I really am just enjoying these people bonding. And there's this whole running joke with the club's ambassador, Mr. G, who has this running joke who's kind of flipping between feminist and anti-feminist. I think I love Mr. G. Provided a lot of great laughs, I think, this. And there's also this other character, this side character, Sylvie, who her whole backstory and her crazed face is it just always brings a smile and a laugh. I think it's great. And a little side note, I love it when the end credits of this film, they're bloopers. I miss bloopers being the end credits. I think they're absolutely hilarious. And there's another thing. I thought the score as well was really brilliant. I actually kind of, at times, brought a lot of like sincerity to the film.
Interesting.
And like a lot of it has a very dreamy quality to it. Especially there's this one track called "Be With," which I've actually listened to multiple times. Which I was like, that is really dreamy and kind of transportive, and I really transportative, I should say. And I just was like, I just really like the score. And a score in a comedy film is not one you usually take away from comedy films. And it's by Leo Brinberg and Charlie XCX, and I like Charlie XCX in the first place, so I will have a little bit of bias there, but I do think the score is actually really good, and actually one of my favourites of the year, which, once again, comedy, wasn't expecting. So yeah, I really recommend Bottoms. I think it's hilarious. I thought it was just a great time. It has heart. I really was with these characters. It's really just well put together, well structured, zippy, 90 minutes, hilarious, and for a comedy, I'm giving this a 9 out of 10. I had a really good time.
I'm gonna have to watch this.
I think the only issue for me was really those first 10 minutes.
The adjustment period.
I honestly thought you were going to say the only issue with me was the person I was with after the messages that you sent to me. I didn't see it with Lewis, but you sent me some messages after to the person. That was very classic. Yeah.
It's very classic of him if he's listening. He knows what he was doing during this film. So anyway, that was Bottom. So Kyle, let's get into Saltburn.
Saltburn.
Saltburn, yeah. So this was written and directed by Emerald Fennel and stars Barry Keoghan, Jacob Elordi, I should say, Rosamund Pike, Richard E. Grant, Archie Madekwe, and Alison Oliver.
Big cast.
So,
big cast.
Film opens with this boy, Oliver, who's played by Barry Keoghan. And he's a boy from Preston, which is near Merseyside, Liverpool. And he moves to study at Oxford in 2006. And he's this lonely, he's deemed a loser by the rest of his college, and even one of his teachers can't be bothered with him. And he's drawn to this other student named Felix, who's played by Jacob Elordi, who's the complete polar opposite. He is this socialite, he's this tall, handsome, everyone loves and adores this guy and wants to be with him. And yet after a lucky happenstance, the two bond and become friends, resulting in Felix actually inviting Oliver to stay at the Saltburn Manor over the summer holidays, in which all sorts of strange and twisted, perverse things go down. And that's all I'll say from that, because I don't really want to give anything away. Now, Kyle, what did you think of Saltburn?
This is going to be... If I'm taking my time, it's because, like I said, I don't want to give anything away. I had no idea what this film was when I went into it. And I was very intrigued by the kind of setup with Barry Keoghan, and I was like, okay, what's going to happen? And especially kind of like you said, when they go to Saltburn, there's a lot of things that happen. And there's a lot of times I saw a lot of the cinema going, like, you know, like those kind of sounds. But no, what you get is a kind of really interesting film. I'm trying to even describe what kind of genre it is. Kind of like a thriller, psychological, you know, definitely.
Yep.
I have to admit, I found it was quite funny at times. I got a good few laughs out of this film.
When it's trying to be funny, I think for the most part it's pretty successful in that. Yeah, especially with Rosamund Pike and Richard
E. Grant. Obviously, Rosamund Pike. They play Felix's parents, the kind of aristocrats of Saltburn, and they do some very kind of funny kind of anecdotes when they're talking about like their poor friends. Oh dear, poor Pamela. You know, she's had a really hard time of it recently, but we're chucking her out. It's like that kind of stuff. I think that's where for me this film really thrives are these characters. I think every single one of them was really unique. From kind of Felix, who's kind of the kind of fun aristocrat, to his cousin Farley, who has a kind of interesting, who Gonfalo will know because he watched Gran Turismo. You will know that actor.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
I just remembered that was him.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
okay.
And then Oliver as well. Like they all kind of bring something kind of unique to this film.
He'll probably be prouder of this one, I hope.
No, I would say it's a better story. I'm just trying to think so much of what I can say without giving something away, because I really don't. But yeah, I have to say the characters are really interesting. The story is, you don't expect what's going to happen. And even saying that, you won't expect anything. Telling you it's bizarre doesn't actually prepare you for that. Which I think what leaves this film quite good, actually, because you know, Lewis was. We were talking about the marketing earlier, and we're like, it's very interesting marketing, and I think that may do benefit to the film for people going into it, especially having a clue.
And others might feel different about that.
Yeah, others might feel different. Obviously, was it a limited screening we went to see?
Yeah,
is it not out yet?
This comes out next.
I had no idea. I did no clue. Oh, okay.
Saltburn, interesting. Yes, I would say so too. Yeah. Firstly, I want to get off the bat. I think the film looks absolutely gorgeous. This was shot by Linus Sandgren, who I'm sure he will absolutely get an Oscar nomination for cinematography. I think it gives this really twisted, sort of perverse story like a duplicitous look. So everything looks beautiful, but deep down there's something really seedy going on. And I think that's a really there's a specific scene. And now this isn't really a spoiler. I'm not going to say, but there's a line Oliver says about referencing a vampire, right? And the beginning of that scene is so Kyle knows what I'm talking about. But the beginning, the way that scene is shot and the way it starts is they've framed it like a gothic horror with a woman in a white dress, and I was like, that is genius. I thought that the way that whole thing was framed, a lot of it is just gorgeous and just really. It's kind of disgusting how pretty it is, which is a weird thing to say.
There's a really fun party scene, the kind of costume department I really enjoyed, because it kind of
had a good time.
It showed that kind of one, it was like it was impressive big scene. Like there was a lot of extras and stuff that they
Like
controlled in
sets,
those scenes,
yeah.
and it gave me that kind of very kind of animalistic, aristocratic vibe with these like some of them wearing kind of like
The masks. And all
the
that,
mask,
yeah.
animal fair, and the costume department there, I thought I was really good. But pervertive is a really good way of describing this film.
Yes, there's a lot of very perverse and loaded things that happen in this film, and like you're saying, I do like how each character is quite individual. No one's really the same, even though like you have the two airheaded parents with Richard E. Grant and Rosamund Pike, who I agree, Kyle, provide a lot of the good laughs. They are like, airheaded and ignorant in sort of different ways. Like Richard E. Grant is constantly distracting himself with stuff and around the manor and stuff he has to do, which I liked, and then that comes into play later on. But yeah, there is this thing with Saltburn, and I think the ending of the film, I'm not going to spoil anything, obviously. I think the ending of the film is going to make or break it for people. I think people are going to be on board with what happens and buy it, and others are going to be like, ugh, really? But I'm like, yes, I think the ending is good, and the whole sort of overarching reason, whatever. Trying to be smoking bitters about
so
it.
Hard
the whole
to
overarching
explain without spoiling it, isn't
story
it?
works. I do agree with Kyle though. We were talking before the show that I think there needed to be some narrative tweaks to make the ending really stick the landing.
Yeah, the ending that we got, definitely.
So it's less of a big shock and more of like a slow burn because you're kind of figuring it out as it goes, or is it more like
there's little hints and clues and stuff that go on.
I think it picks up more in the third act, definitely.
Yes, I agree.
Kind of
I think also an issue with it is kind of the pacing for me. It felt longer than 2 hours. And I think I also think this might be a problem with the marketing as well, because the marketing is like, oh look at this though, wow, flashy, like, and yes, there is that stuff, there is that stuff, and they make think the whole half of the film is going to be like that. We do get to that stuff, but the film is more deliberately paced than that. But there's certain things I think I would have liked to spend a bit more time in Oxford. Like I said, there's some narrative decisions that I think we kind of needed a bit more fleshed out, especially with Oliver, and there's some there's just, I think the film is obviously there's this going for this like parasitical theme. You know, a man spoiled by riches and like wants to stay in this world, and there's this whole arrogance and naivety of the upper class that they don't observe what's going on around them. But I just think it needed a little bit more focus, and I think just a little more. That's kind of it for me. I think it's a beautiful film. I like the characters. It's interesting. But it just needed a little bit more for me. That's me personally. I don't know about you.
No, I agree. I'm like you said, the ending. I am probably more on the fence than fully with it. Like we were discussing earlier, because obviously we are professionals, and we were just rewriting the script. I do think that there could have been some things earlier on that would have made me personally enjoy the ending that we got a bit more. I'm not saying I hated it. I definitely was not like, I thought it completely ruined it.
I think it does work for the most part.
I think it does work. And I say, for me, the characters are just the best part of this. The parents. There's a specific line where a personal friend of the family had died, and she goes, anything for attention. And that just killed me. That just absolutely killed me. And then just the way she would kind of get hooked in and like gossip and go, oh no, please do tell. I thought she was fantastic. But for me, it was so close to being really good. But there's just that tiny bit missing.
There's just something. I agree. Yeah, I do. That does bring a point, like you were saying with that quote from Rosamund Pike. And they have that sort of detached from humanity and empathy. These people in the upper class are, and I feel like I just needed, because it's tackling a few things here, and I needed more for at least one of these themes and ideas to be like
there's
really
a lot being
strong. But there's so much going on that it's like it's tackling sort of two things. Anyway, Kyle, what are you going to give Saltburn?
It's gonna get a 7. It was so close to being a really solid 8, but there was just something missing there for me. So I'm gonna give it a solid 7.
Yeah. Kel, you and me, once again, on our track record of seem to be agreeing with film scores recently. I'm also giving it a 7. Like discussed, I think there's just I just needed. I mean, maybe on a rewatch, maybe when I know what's going on, maybe I'll pick up on things. Maybe that was actually
I was
more intelligent than I thought it was at first watch. And we absolutely recommend you go see it. I think, like we said, just for the cinematography alone and the production, and it's got funny moments. The characters are great, and
be prepared.
Maybe
that's all I'm
it's
saying.
another watch. Yeah, be prepared. It's a lot.
You will love the final seconds. Yeah. Just you will love
the final few seconds, exactly. But look, that was Saltburn and Bottoms. So now it's time to move to David Fincher. So Gonzalo.
Okay.
We haven't, obviously, you've been silent for the last 20 minutes.
Well, yeah, I haven't seen any of these couple movies, so in Gonzalo fashion, I don't watch movies. What is this, a movie podcast or something? But yeah, so we're going to be talking about like a bunch of the Fincher movies and the ones that we personally like the most and stuff. And honestly, I haven't seen that many Fincher movies, unsurprisingly, to anyone that's listened to any other episode of the podcast.
Yeah, too busy watching Gran Turismo.
Oh god, I regret watching that movie so hard.
It's based on a true story.
Oh yeah, true.
Sorry, I didn't see the full title.
God damn, based on a true story. Yeah, you gotta add that. No, but he's one of those filmmakers that's very interesting because he's got a very well-known style. He works very closely with a lot of the same people. And and he does tend to pick more like a specific kind of genre of film. He likes doing those thrillers.
You know.
He likes exploring those characters up like at their breaking point and seeing what makes them tick and stuff. And I've seen a couple of his movies. Sadly, one of the movies I've seen is Benjamin Button, which was really bad. I don't recommend it.
Not his best work.
I've not seen it. What is bad about it? I know the general premise.
Okay, so the general premise.
Is it the premise that you think?
No, because the general premise could be interesting, and the idea is that like there's a.
It's based on a book.
Like there's someone who ages backwards.
No, I think it's a short story by Scott Fitzgerald. Actually,
it does like take place in like I think it starts in like the 1920s and stuff like that. It's just incredibly long, drawn out, and says very little. I did not enjoy it one bit. It's just like I
agree. And also, it's funny because you were saying like Fincher has quite a distinct style.
That does not feel like him at all. I didn't know that was him. No.
It feels like someone else directed this film. It's very strange.
It's basically like if when you were a child you just turned on the TV and you saw like a generic historical film. That kind of vibe, that kind of very generic directorial kind of thing. It's also trying to play it as like a love story and stuff. It's quite odd. It's very strange, and it's like one of these movies that like takes part throughout a very long span of time, and that just makes it feel incredibly floaty and disconnected and it's bad. Don't watch it. Very long as well. Very long. Well, out of the other two films that I've watched, which is our Fight Club and The Social Network, I'm going to be talking about The Social Network. So,
well, you and Kyle are joining forces here because this is both your favorite Fincher film.
Yeah, I can talk about others.
Fight Club is okay. It's a cool story. It's a cool story, and
all right, okay, great. Well, we're moving on.
Best review I've ever heard.
No, it's
a cool story. Put it on the goddamn Blu-ray box.
Honestly, it's an interesting film. It does very interesting stuff, and it's very like you can see his style very much in that film. It's this kind of dark grittiness, but very controlled kind of disaster. Like even though you're seeing like this kind of like a very underground society kind of look, and it's all very
the Phoenix Society.
It's all very dirty. It's all very stuff like that. Like you're following a cult and things like that. Like it's still very like controlled. His directorial style is still very controlled. He knows he's shooting exactly what he's wanting to shoot. He's doing these very precise camera movements and stuff. It's quite interesting, and I would say message-wise, it's an interesting deconstruction of late-stage capitalism mixed with the idea of toxic masculinity. But a lot of people don't get that, and a lot of people watch that movie and think, oh my god, yeah, Tyler Durden, that's the guy. Yeah.
Are you talking? Did you just change to Fight Club?
I've been talking to Fight Club this whole time.
What?
Yeah.
No, you haven't.
Yeah, guys.
I thought you said Social Network.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about Social Network. I just wanted to do a quick review of Fight Club.
Oh my god, right. I genuinely
You're so
misheard you. I'm
out
So
sorry.
out of it.
I thought you were
It's
talking
fine.
about Social Network.
Social Network, on the other hand, is also very similar in that sense. It's
Moving on.
No, but it is.
Because I was like, yeah, it does. Yeah,
No,
yeah,
but
you're right. This all fits.
I mean, it kind of
Social
does.
Network
It
and
kind of
then
does.
Tyler
It's also
Durden.
very much an
It does,
exploration of late stage capitalism. It's also very much a very controlled filmography in the film and stuff. The thing with Social Network that I really like is the way the dialogue is written. So the dialogue is very clearly written by what's his name from West Wing. And he's got this weird cadence that he uses for his characters, and it very much matches the kind of tone of the movie. So this film is exploring the Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, and his relationships and his personality, who he is as a person as he goes along to become one of the richest people in the friggin' world. So yeah, it's really interesting. We get to know him in like the Ivy League schools, being this pedant asshole who pushes everyone who ever cared about him away. And even from the very start of the movie, you kind of understand his character instantly through this one conversation that he's having at a bar with his soon-to-be ex-girlfriend. Yeah. It's actually fascinating. I really do like how they explore this character. I think the casting was also spot on, and it
I mean, Jesse Eisenberg was typecast
for years
and
as
years.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, honestly, he does have this kind of like energy where you're like, I want to see what he's about to say, but I also hate his guts while he's saying it. He's a perfect lead because you are very interested in what's going on, but you never truly get on his side. It's one of those cases where, like, for the whole movie, you empathize with him without taking his side and realizing how wrong most of what he's doing is. And it's very interesting. It explores his relationships with other people, the way he kind of like isolates himself and stuff. It's obviously a fictionalized version of reality, and reality is way more complex than that, and it had to be restructured to what actually happened. But it's a really good character kind of like study of this person. Like, if he was he is a real person, but even if he was like a fictionalized character, it's a very like in-depth look at this type of person, this type of narcissist who's like, hey, I this is what I want, this is what I want to achieve, and like as soon as he gets like a taste of like what being in charge, being in power is about, he basically does anything and everything to keep hold of it, but at the same time is incredibly insecure about his abilities and his capabilities, and like, he's like terrified of losing the very little that he has constantly throughout the whole film. And it's really interesting. Like, it very much focuses on his relationship with his best friend from the Ivy League, and how they build this creepy ass fucking website to rate women without their consent, and then turn it into the giant conglomerate that is Facebook. And it's a good one.
What's really interesting is that, we're talking about David Fincher and his typical type of films. Obviously, the thriller, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Gone Girl, Seven, Zodiac, yada yada yada. It's a lot of it is that, and then all of a sudden, he makes a biopic, The Social Network, and it's one of his best, if not his best film, and it's paced brilliantly. If anyone,
good.
I mean, like.
Feels like a metronome.
If someone looks, you're making a story about Mark Zuckerberg and how he made Facebook.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, that sounds dull as hell. And he makes it this thrilling back and forth, multiple lawsuits, this whole sort of going multiple time periods. This fast talking.
But that's the weird thing, because like when you look at the subject matter, it's boring as fuck. If you read, if I watched the video essay on this, I would be bored to death. But like he does manage to like put a lot of motion into this story. Like, it's like he's pushing it forward during the whole movie. Like, it's a metronome. Like you said, the pacing is fucking amazing. Like, it just goes back and forth and back and forth. And he does this thing with, like, framing within a framing within a framing kind of thing, where, like, we keep getting back to these different lawsuits that are going on throughout his life. And he's telling the story of the story while he's in this lawsuit. So, like, it keeps cutting back and forth a lot, but in a way that doesn't feel confusing, because the story that we're following, the line that we're following through all of this, isn't actually the timeline, but his kind of, like, a struggle with his friendships and his struggle with, like, his relationships. So that is the part that really keeps the thing moving forward throughout all of these time jumps and time skips and, like, all of this, like, stuff happening. Like, since the actual, like, line of, like, the story, the character arc, if you say, it's a very flat arc, but the character arc of this Mark Zuckerberg is the kind of thing that we're following. It doesn't matter how much he jumps back and forth and how much he skips time and anything like that, because it still feels fluid and consistent throughout. I personally, like, it's one that I've watched several times, and I'm not a big fan of, like, biopics in the slightest.
No.
Yeah.
It's one of the best, for sure. Okay, well, this was also your favourite.
Yes.
I'm sure you want to talk about this one as well.
No, I mean, along the kind of same lines, I kind of find this a really interesting character study, especially kind of Mark Zuckerberg, but also with Eduardo, played by Andrew Garfield.
Yes.
As well as the Visco twins, played by somebody.
Oh yeah, ooh, that's not aged well.
No. I have to admit,
Army Hammer, just to say.
Yeah, Army Hammer. The process of making them twins was done really well. Yeah. Like, there is not a moment. I'm pretty sure when I first saw this, I thought
they were twins. I thought they were twins.
I genuinely thought Arnie Hammer was like twins or somebody. Yeah. But no, I what I really, really like about
Good news
this
is there's only one cannibal out there, not two.
All right, Jesus.
Oh my God.
I really enjoyed the kind of story between Mark and Eduardo, and the kind of the relationship they kind of form. The realization that they're onto something, because obviously Facebook, or at the time it was called The Facebook, was purely a university-led social media website. It was mainly for students. It was for the campus, and then they kind of went, they noticed people kind of using it, and they're like, oh, brilliant. And it was the expansion, moving out to Silicon Valley, introduction of Sean Parker, played by Justin Timberlake, who founded Napster.
He does such a good job of being like the rock star asshole.
Yeah,
it's fantastic.
I get the thriller aspect of this, to be honest, with like the whole kind of lawsuits, because you start it and you're like, oh, this lawsuit's happening, and you're kind of there questioning what happened, because as an outsider you're like, Facebook's fine, nothing bad's happened to Facebook. You're just kind of wondering, but I don't know about Justin Timberlake. I think he's maybe the one of the things I don't love about the film.
I really, really wish Justin Timberlake wasn't in this film. I think he's the one flaw in it. I do. I don't buy him, and obviously, that's also another casting that hasn't aged well. If you've heard reports about Justin Timberlake in the past. I know David Fincher's friends with him. I know he directed a bunch of his music videos, but I really don't like him in this film. I know, obviously, I don't like his character, which you're obviously not supposed to. He's very obnoxious and arrogant and whatnot. But I just don't really like the Justin Timberlake.
I didn't mind it because
that is a flaw in the film.
For me, he gives the exact thing that I thought he needed to give, which is an arrogant, pump his asshole. Yeah. And he's like charismatic-y enough to kind of like you believe that Mark Zuckerberg's like taking by him,
No, I do. For the most part,
but he is Justin Timberlake. He's himself.
I know. It's just that's the thing. I don't think Justin Timberlake's been good in anything.
No, because he's not really an actor. I don't know.
Friends with Benefits is a masterpiece of modern cinema.
Like the thing is, like he plays himself because he's not an actor and he doesn't act. So like in my case, because I already consider him a pompous asshole, he was perfect for the role because he didn't need to do nothing.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I just wish he'd cast an actor.
An actual actor. Yeah.
Yeah. For me
Could have had a
personally,
cameo
yeah.
with him
But,
just
like,
showing up as himself and then leaving.
Yeah. Speaking of actors, I mean that the Andrew Garfield performance I think is brilliant. It's one of his best still, and still shocks me that actually there's. I know I always bring up Oscars, I always do, but one still pisses me off. This didn't win Best Picture and lost to The King's Speech. Or actually, that year, Inception and Toy Story 3 also were nominated, and somehow The King's Speech won.
Wow.
That will always piss me off. Anyway, that's another thing that hasn't aged well. There's something about this film surrounds it, just things haven't aged well.
Yeah.
And another one is that Andrew Garfield didn't get an Oscar nomination or the Best Supporting Actor nomination for this role.
It's surprising. It's one of his
genuinely
best roles, and again, it really plays well as like a casting choice because he is very much like just himself, very like a very relatable personality where like you want to like kind of like him.
He's the one.
And
he's the way.
That's the
relate
thing.
to
Like
situation.
it's really good to have him as the quote unquote antagonist of the person we're following because it just hammers home how wrong the actions of Mark Zuckerberg in that case were and how like how much of betrayal it was of this friendship because essentially it is like a character study about that. This movie isn't about how fucking creepy it was that Facebook started as a creepy way of rating women without their consent. It's not about how the whole economy behind this whole startup thing is like a whole fucking sham where it's like, oh yeah, the young new talent and they're all fucking rich people from the Ivy League and stuff like that. It's not really tackling or looking at those societal issues. It's very much focusing in on this character and his journey and his lack of evolution and his lack of change and how that hurts him and his relationships and ends up making him like isolated from everyone and everything that ever cared about him in the slightest. And he ends up with this all this power and all this money and alone. And it's very much that kind of like, that we've seen this kind of story before, but it's told in a very interesting way. And like I said, like the dialogue, that was a brilliant choice to get, what's his name as a scriptwriter? The guy from West Wing. Aaron Sorkin. Fantastic choice, I feel like, because getting that detached cadence that like you get that like that the dialogue is just so brilliant. I feel like any other kind of scriptwriter would have made it more natural, would have made it like slower and stuff, and it just wouldn't have had the impact that it has, like the way
I really miss Aaron Sorkin writing scripts. I know he's moved to directing now, and he was such kind of wish he was doing screenplays again.
He was such a good screenwriter.
But yeah, look, that was Social Network, and sorry because I thought you were talking about Social Network.
Oh, no worries. I mean, a lot of the things that I said could very much apply to Social Network. I understand because I was basically defining his like style and stylistic choices and stuff. But
but yeah, just to quickly touch on Fight Club. I'm not a fan of Fight Club. I don't get why it's this beloved thing. Like you go on IMDb and it's somehow the 12th highest rated film of all time.
Dude, Brooms.
How? I really don't see it. I find it a really annoying film, and it's one of those things where narration either makes or breaks a film. It can either be a really interesting insight into the character and a good way to deliver the story, or it can be overdone and patronizing and annoying, and it's the latter. I really don't like it. It's so overly narrated. I just don't like. I don't care about Edward Norton. I don't care about Helen Bonham Carter. I know the twist. I know it was a bit. Look, I knew the twist going in. Maybe why that sort of.
I would say watching it the first time without knowing the twist, it made it a little bit more interesting. But at the same time, like Edward, like I cannot understand how anyone sees Edward Norton's character and likes him. Like again, this is another issue I have a lot. Like there's so many times where like you have a male protagonist that is clearly a fucking piece of shit, and they're gonna tell you the story of how his downfall for being a fucking piece of shit, and I'm like. I don't like. I can't connect to this character.
I don't care.
Yeah,
and it's just look. I get. Look, I mean, obviously, it was made in 1999, and its analysis on like consumerism and what we're doing to the world and all, and this sort of we've all become soft creatures who rely on these objects and things to make us feel.
Yeah, but again, that's not really like the criticism that the movie's making. The movie's talking about how that is what this new movement of toxic masculinity is trying to make you believe.
Yes,
that the problem is like becoming soft. Like, it's the whole thing of like hard men make good societies make soft men, and soft men make hard times, and that kind of bullshit.
But even that stuff on like like Tyler goes on about how the objects basically control us, and that's what we strive for, and we strive for more money and more things. I'm like, yeah, they did that 20 years before this. Like, I'm not seeing anything original insight into it. It feels like a film that's trying to be cool, and I can see you're trying to be cool, and therefore you're not cool. And I just don't. I mean, look at visual. Like, I think it's well put together. It's grimy and it looks disgusting. I'm like, yeah, that's you did that. It looks that way, great. And it has that really. It does have that really one funny cut. Is where Tyler and Edward Norton's character are on the bus. And there's an advert for like a Dolce and Gabbana thing or perfume or whatever, and there's this guy with a 6-pack and whatnot, and Edward Norton says, "Is that," like, he's all like, "I'm all angsty and angry," and he goes, "Is that what a real man's supposed to look like?" And then they both laugh, and then it cuts to the next scene, and it's Brad Pitt with his shirt off, with the best body you've ever seen, and I'm like, that has to be a joke.
It has to be on purpose. That
has to be a joke. That's really funny.
Like, given that Tyler Durden is like what Edward Norton imagines and inspires to be. It makes sense.
I do think that cut is great, and I really think Meatloaf is really good in the film. I think Meatloaf playing Bob is great, but I find it quite annoying for the most part. Anyway, sorry.
Don't worry, that's fine. We can rant about Fight Club.
It's one of these things. I don't get it. I don't get it. But like my pick is 2007's Zodiac, which I watched on like BBC Two like 5 years ago or something, and then watched it again over the pandemic, and I was like, whoa, this is just an brilliant. It's 2.5 hours long, but it's like an longer if you watch the director's cut, airtight procedural. And it's set in LA or San Francisco, California, I should just say, between 1968 and 83, and it chronicles this cartoonist who's played by Jake Gyllenhaal and another journalist. What's the journalist's name again? Robert Downey Jr.'s character, Paul Avery, who worked for the San Francisco Chronicle, and Mark Ruffalo's Inspector David Toschi, as they are trying to uncover the famous Zodiac murders. And look, we talked about this briefly as well as when you were talking about the way David Fincher directs, but he is such a perfectionist and almost OCD when it comes to his productions. He wants everything to look the part. He wants to get the right shot.
He's one of the he's one of like the filmmakers who uses the most CGI that nobody notices.
Yes, we'll get to that in a minute. Don't you worry.
Is it the camera going through the coffee mug?
Oh yeah. There's more. It's more than that. It's more than that. Like this, we'll just touch on the CGI now because you brought it up. Like you're saying, because he's a perfectionist and because he wants the locations to look exactly like they did when the murders happened, and obviously it's years later, so obviously San Francisco does not look the exact same, and so if he couldn't do that. He couldn't build the sets itself, although he did build a lot of sets and use exact locations. He would use blue screen. And you can't tell. No. It's brilliant visual effects work. It looks fantastic.
Anyone who looks at the poor visual effects in recent movies and says, "Oh, it's just it's hard to do VFX. You can't do them right. Oh, it's the VFX artists are bad." No, this is a really fucking old film. You can tell. It's because when you give it the VFX artist the time to actually work on the project, and as a director, you're implementing and taking into account, hey, this is going to be a VFX shot. I'm directing the VFX as well. I'm not just putting on a blue screen and saying, let someone do it. Like Fincher is proof that you can do this very well if you just give a fuck. And he does, and he really does.
And like, there's those things. It's these these landscape shots and these city shots and these overhead shots, and you're like, oh, that must just be San Francisco. It's like, no,
It's not,
that's CGI, and it's
I've seen so many
unbelievable how well it
breakdowns of the CGIs for Fincher movies. It's absolutely insane. Like we're talking about the Social Network.
he knows.
Like, you think they just shot the same scene twice with two different actors? They did not. They had a second actor and did a lot of facial and head replacements.
Yeah.
They did so much CGI for that, and for this specific movie, so many of the backgrounds,
And
so many.
even
of the
though
streets.
Curious Case of Benjamin Button is not his best film, the
CGI is
work on it
fantastic.
also
It's
amazing.
incredible.
CGI is amazing. But yeah, and also like because he wanted the murder. There's the first murder in the film, which is the two teenagers on July 4th, and they drive up and then they just get shot by the Zodiac killer in their car. At least the woman does. That is like almost exactly the way from the police reports, from the witness statements. It's the exact location. The car models are the same. The clothes, he got the exact clothes. Very, very eerie. There's also the other big murder scene, which is at the quarry, where he ties the couple up and stabs them. He wanted the location to look exactly the same, so they airlifted trees in and put them in the exact like geographical location as they would have been back then.
Damn.
I'm like, oh, who does that? I mean, what studio would even allow that these days? I'm like, that is absolutely nuts.
That's like too much, man. That's too much.
Yeah, it's like no, there needs to be these trees here. I was like, oh, I don't know, do you want to film somewhere else? Nah, get the trees here.
God.
I'm like, what the hell? It's absolute insanity. But look, obviously, outside of just the way the production looks, beautifully shot, the aesthetics of it's brilliant. It's a brilliant dissection into obsession and truth as well. And it's like, what is, because obviously there's murders that the Zodiac killer has done. There's witness statements, and he was in this outfit and all that. Then there's other things of, did he do those murders? Is he just messing with the police and with the journalists? And it's who is actually, what is truth here? And I kind of love that. And there's obviously never an answer. To this day, you don't know who the Zodiac killer is. And I love how it's constantly playing with that. It's that reality is sort of bending in a way. There is, who is the Zodiac killer? And there's also the way Fincher shoots specific things. Like the way he does the first two murders, like I said, the way they're staged are very similar. And then there's the third encounter when he picks up the woman on the side of the road because he says, oh, your tyre needs fixing. He goes and fixes the tyre, but it's not actually fixing. He's loosening it so that when her tyre blows, her and her baby have to go in the car with this hitchhiker. And the way that shot is very, very shadowy and dark and different. And it's obviously because, to this day, the woman claims that it was the Zodiac killer, but when the Zodiac killer gave the deed, he always gives excruciating details of his murders and his victims. The Zodiac killer gives a very loose account of that specific scenario because it probably wasn't him. And I kind of love that whole thing. Oh, he's alluding to that by the way he shoots it. I think that's brilliant. And obviously, Jake Gyllenhaal, what was Jake Gyllenhaal? I've completely forgot his name there, sorry. The Robert character and Paul Avery's character, I love how they sort of unravel through this whole thing. They have this. They're two people who never really bond together. Like, they're two completely different. He's a cartoonist and he's a journalist. They wouldn't really actually socialize in the same field, and yet they join forces. This odd pairing who come together because they're both kind of obsessed with these puzzles and trying to find the truth. And obviously, it goes very badly for both of them. Although the Paul Avery thing, that did not actually happen to him at all. He actually had a very successful career long after this. But for Robert, this did ruin his life, this obsession. And it leads to one of the best and creepiest scenes Fincher's ever done, and it's in the basement. I don't know if you remember the scene I'm talking about, when he goes to the guy who has all the old films, and that whole scene is absolutely terrifying. Just every step of the way you're like, don't do that, Robert, don't do that, Robert. And then he just gets further and further deeper into this creepy house, and the way it's lit with the shadows and the tungsten lights, it's brilliant. And then you hear he says, no one's don't worry, no one's in the house. And then he's in the basement and he hears the creaking of the floorboards upstairs, and you're like, you said no one's in there in the house. And he's like, yeah, there's not. And it's like, what? What is going on here? And you're in this creepy basement with all these old film reels, and it's just the tension of it is absolutely phenomenal. And it's just a really, even though it's spoilers, I guess. There's no one knows who the Zodiac Killer is. We never find out the truth. We don't. There's no like. There's a big suspect who you think it's supposed to be, but we never know. And David Fincher's asking you to commit to a film, a 2-hour plus 45-minute film, where you don't get any resolution. Really, you just see people lose their minds and become obsessed. Yeah. And there is no satisfaction here. There is no, we finally got the killer in the end. No. It's just a pure, honest account, almost honest, I should say, of here's what this. You don't get these things in real life. You don't get the answers.
Do you think it's like his
no matter how hard you try or how hard you obsess, it's not going to come.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Like with specifically with police procedurals and police media, like since the 1960s, there's been this push to portray every single thing as like something they end up solving. Most cases, like 90% of cases, go unsolved. No. Like very few cases actually get a neat resolution. But no, I wanted to ask if you think it's like Fincher trying to put us in the shoes of these people, like becoming obsessed with this case and trying to figure it out, but never really reaching that like answer. You know, like is he trying to put us in this situation where like we will finish the movie and discuss and say, no, I think it's this guy, no, I think it's that guy, like. You know, like, is he trying to make us feel that desperation of, I'm so close and yet we never got to, you know? Yeah.
I think that's it. I think you do feel that, especially with the, what character? I love this. I think this actor is great. Is John Lynch, right?
Yeah.
The big guy, the bald guy, who plays Arthur Allen. They obviously are very much hinting that he is the Zodiac Killer, and he was kind of a big suspect back in the day, but there's no physical proof, no murder weapon or DNA evidence or anything to prove that it was him. And I think that is the big tease that in the film. That's the big tease Lynch is putting there. It's like, we're getting somewhere, and then he just goes, nah, that's it. You don't get that resolution. Because none of us got the resolution. The victims never got the resolution. The families never got the resolution. And I think that is... I mean, obviously he's not going to make up a magical ending, and he's not going to go, I do believe it's him. Here's him with a knife. Yeah. But I do think that was good that he did that sort of that tease and that hint. It's like, but that's all the information I'm going to give you, and I just really love it. I mean, I suppose I should also give a runner-up spot to Seven as well. I think Seven is aged brilliantly. I think it's brutally dark, and once again, the production values of it are brilliant. It's this horrible, rain-soaked noir that is just really grotesque and twisted. And I think one of Morgan Freeman's still greatest performances. I really like Morgan Freeman in that film. I think he is genuinely brilliant.
You did bring up Seven a lot.
I just think that's a really enthralling.
I remember you bringing it up a lot when we discussed the Batman and like the look of the film and the feel of desperation.
Yes.
And like,
it takes a lot from Seven. I think absolutely. I think that film just really puts you in this atmosphere, and obviously you have the whole John Doe characters like, everyone is a sinner and the world is miserable, and I'm like, you know what, I'm kind of believing you because of the way this film is shot and put together. It is miserable, but I think it's just a brilliantly directed film. I think Seven is still absolutely one of his best films. And any other shout outs, Kyle?
Gone Girl.
Gone Girl.
Yeah,
brilliant. I really like
excellent thriller. Thingamajig from Saltburn.
Rosamund Pike, obviously brilliant performance in Gone Girl.
Less funny in Gone Girl.
No, true.
Yes.
Gone Girl's a really, I think the way that film is paced. I watched it actually last week because I hadn't actually seen it. It was one of the The weird thing is, the two Fincher films I hadn't seen were arguably
one of his most famous ones. That's Gone Girl and Fight Club are like two.
So I watched both of them, right? I watched both of them, right? And Gone Girl, because I'd read the book and I really liked the book, I wasn't particularly interested in seeing the film for some reason, even though it was Fincher and
but sometimes really when you're
cast. Like Tyler Perry, by the way, is really fucking good in Gone Girl. Anyway, what was I saying? But yeah, because I read the book, and then I did hear, oh, by the way, they changed the ending. I don't know where the hell I read that or heard that. They changed the ending of the film. And I was like, really? Okay, I better go watch it then. So I watch it, and I'm like, whoever said that's a liar? The book, the ending's almost exactly the same.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
Like, it's a really, it's for the most part, it's a very, very faithful adaptation. Okay. And like, I remember watching it. It was like 2.5 hours long as well, and it was like, I remember pausing it to go get a drink, and I was like, oh my god, I'm this far in. Like, I was like, wow. Holy shit, I felt like I've only been watching it for an hour. I was like, this is just, the pace of it is absolutely brilliant. And I love, obviously, the whole narrative. I'm not going to spoil anything. It has a great way of, like, having this distinction between the first half and the second half of the film. And I'm not going to spoil it because, obviously, you get a lot from Ben Affleck's perspective, Nicholas Dunn. And then you get the reveal of something, and then there's this whole narrative change in the second half.
I've sadly had
really
it
splits the film up quite
just
nicely.
by pop culture osmosis, but my girlfriend is a big fan of the movie, and she really loves the wife's speech in this movie. Like the whole speech that she does about like stuff, like it's I don't want to get too much into it, but
the speech she does about her favorite cheese.
Yes, there's a moment where she talks about her life and stuff, and it's really interesting. And and
it makes me really
a great
example of the narration in that film is genius.
Yes.
So there you go.
Versus Fight Club, where you don't like it. Yeah.
I think the narration's really good. And Ben Affleck as well. I really like Ben Affleck's performance. The whole cast. Bar, once again, I think there is a miscast there, and I think Neil Patrick Harris for me. I don't think he works in that film for me. I just... There's certain delivery. I think at first I'm like, yeah, okay. And then when you get to his rich manor, his rich lake house even, I'm like, the way he's delivering the lines and the way he's like flexing what he has, I'm like, oh, this is just Barney Stinson. This is the way you're speaking, the way you're smug about it.
It's interesting because for such a perfectionist director as Fincher, the fact that there's always like the one-off where you're like, are you just really good friends in real life, you know? It's really interesting because in everything else it's like, you know, Kubrick levels perfection. Of, we gotta shoot it again until you get it right. But then you get the one character where they're like, oh no, you do it, it's fine.
And I do also, as a great sort of analysis on American culture and how the media creates narratives and sort of pigeonholes people into certain lives. And I really like that stuff. I really like the
very
media
relevant
monster that is behind the whole thing, and it's very relevant and still very relevant. But anyway, I guess that was our Fincher episode.
I mean, honorable mentions to that one episode of Community that is not directed by Fincher, but tries to look like it is. The Butthole Bandit. Yeah, there we go. Butt crack.
Well, okay. I guess that will wrap things up. Thank you, Gunthal, for joining me.
Absolute pleasure as always.
And thank you, Kyle, as well.
Yeah, pleasure as always.
Okay. Well, we're going to stick with our director rituals because next week, in celebration of the release of Napoleon, the following week, we're going to be talking about Ridley Scott.
I've seen a bunch of his. That is good.
Well done, good Gunthal, good boy. So he's on the case for this one.
I got this, guys. I got this. He's done a lot of sci-fi.
Yes, we're going to talk about Ridley Scott. Some of our favourites of his, of course, as well. Maybe some of our least favourites of his, because he has a very, very long and interesting and strange filmography. I think he's one of those classic directors who I'm just like, really? You made that film?
He's got an very interesting career, honestly, and
he's got a very strange career.
Like, and very strange kind of like running themes throughout his films and stuff, and his filmography, and like obsessions where like at some point he's obsessed with this theme and then obsessed with this theme and keeps like repeating it and stuff, and it's interesting. He's an interesting one. We're gonna have fun with that one.
We'll get to that next week. So that'll be next week. So we'll have, and we might just have a review for the Marvels and Anatomy of a Fall if Kyle is still going to follow through with his plans to see
If
them.
I'm brave enough.
I watched Gran
If you're brave
Turismo.
enough.
You got like this is gonna be fine. This is gonna be fine. You got this.
Gonzalo, we watched Meg and Ant-Man.
Okay,
right?
that's a good
You
point.
Don't come
I'm
at
just
us.
saying, Gran Turismo was probably more incompetent than both of those as a film.
Oh, you didn't see Meg 2.
Oh,
I did not see Meg 2. That is true.
my.
I watched the trailer and thought, "Oh, I'm good. Thank you very much. Suffered enough."
Anyway, we hope you join us for our Ridley Scott
Yes.
episode next week. And look, we just give our opinions on all those David Fincher films, plus Bottoms and Saltburn. But at the end of the day, those were our unwanted opinions. Thank you very much. So.